I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
So I'm sure some of you have wondered why I haven't really come forth with any words of wisdom regarding the state of the world, and kind of why I've kept doing the same things that I normally do. Part of it is because the state of the world has always been crazy. So we're always dealing with sort of pushing back against barbarism, like the story of humanity's existence is the tug of war between, in a way, civilization and barbarism. But part of it is definitely because there are so many people in our society that have something to say, right? There's like a cacophony of voices out there who jump into the discussion well before they could have really figured anything out, and who oftentimes leap in with, an instant analysis or some sort of new theory or philosophy, or regurgitated more likely, that's going to somehow make everything make sense or fix everything, right? And I know that's none of that stuff actually is true. It doesn't work. It never will. And it slowly dawned on me as I've seen things kind of unravel a bit in America over the course of months and years, but like definitely speeding up of late, is that an awful lot of people involved in politics and in leading our society and on the commercial side as well are so full of themselves, so sure of themselves, so sure that they're right, that they don't bother to study history or take a pause and think about their own motivations, take another pause and think about the unintended consequences that might flow from whatever it is they're proposing or doing, but blithely start running their mouth or doing some sort of action with full confidence that they've got the answer, though they are a mere mortal and maybe not one of the brightest ones on the planet. And this is a big problem. In fact, I would say that this has been one of humanity's big problems all along. The latest guy, and it's usually a guy, but sometimes it's not a guy, but let's say the latest guy that just thinks he has a genius idea that no one's ever thought of before. Though the reason why he thinks that is because he's never bothered to look and check, because how could anybody know more than he knows right at this moment, right? He has this idea, he implements it or tries to, or he goes about the country or the world, trying to spread that idea. This is human behavior that's been going on for centuries, millennia. One of the things I want to post soon is a little lecture that I gave on Plato's Gorgias, one of my favorite dialogues, because it has to do with democratic politics and democratic rhetoric, and the reason why demagoguery happens in such systems. I want to post it soon because it's an excellent example of this type of phenomenon in a democracy. Plato, of course, thought that such a system was like a ship piloted by drunk sailors. And I would say that is a pretty good depiction of democratic politics most of the time, and definitely is now. We don't have geniuses in charge. We haven't had geniuses in charge maybe in the entire existence of the United States. Definitely not now. Or even particularly, bright people, principled people. So a big problem is these people, these guys with like a great deal of self-confidence and exuberance, and with next to no humility, just have an idea that just kind of gets into their head. And because of their nature, they just automatically assume that they should act on that, and that they have something that everybody else does not have. Even, people like Socrates, Jesus, no. They know more. They are the person of the moment, And so they go and they take a wrecking ball to traditions, practices, habits, institutions, beliefs, relationships, networks, with no regard to what to do next, because I think they assume that they will just know, because they in their minds they are geniuses. So of the things in the Super Bowl, like show by Kendrick Lamar, that I thought was significant, was the song Humble. I love the song Humble. It says it all. Like, that's what people like that need to hear. And this is why I haven't said very much, because I am humble. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And in certain situations, you become very circumspect and you decide to observe. And that's kind of what I would recommend in this situation. In fact, I would also recommend that we all kind of meditate on humility, and that Kendrick Lamar's request that we sit down is, we should all be sitting down. And maybe looking back to the last words of true wisdom that we heard, which usually come from figures like Jesus and Socrates, not from whoever the celebrity is or the politician of the moment is. And that song, Humble, in my mind, in my own way, the errant train of thoughts, led me to thinking about Saint Therese of Lisieux, the so-called little flower, who invented the little way. She didn't invent it. She would say she didn't invent it. She didn't invent it. And so that led me to maybe I need to learn more about the little way, right? And she wrote a book, which is basically an autobiography. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm thinking I should probably read it. In kind of looking up summaries of the key teachings of the little way, because to explain, this woman was, she was a humble little nun. She was born in France in 1873, and she died in 1897. So she only lived for 24 years. She was a Carmelite nun, the youngest of 9 children. Says here her mother died of breast cancer in 1877, and Therese entered the Carmelite convent in Lisieux at age 15. So she spent a little less than 10 years as a Carmelite nun, and she lived a cloistered life of prayer and domestic work, which just means that she lived a very simple life, shut away from the world. And she was not known for doing great big things. She had a sort of inherent sense of humility. So she practiced it in her daily life and just bore with others that she had to live with all the grace that she could muster. And she didn't think of herself as capable of all these big things, right? Even though now she's considered a, quote, doctor of the church and she's a saint. Because in hindsight, everybody can see that the woman lived an exemplary life of humility and self-giving, self-abnegation, right? Pouring out herself for others and giving away true wisdom because she knew that she was not some powerful genius who was going to change the world with with one stroke of the pen. She knew that, right? So she apparently wanted to just live her life in a good way. And she was content with small things, small acts of love for the people she had around her, which would be her Carmelite sisters, and of course for God. She died of tuberculosis in 1897. And so I haven't read her book yet, but I think I will, and I will try to extract some more of her wisdom. But in the meantime, here's a summary that I found, which just resonates so much for me right now with the times that we're living in. First, she teaches to recognize your imperfections, acknowledge your weaknesses and sins, and don't try to control your life. Oh my goodness, that's so hard, right? When you think about it, how heroic do you have to be actually to recognize that you are not perfect and that maybe the latest thing that you have to say on social media does not really need to be said. I mean, we're all so susceptible to this, right? So I'm not making myself any exception to this rule. But the next time we feel like maybe spouting off, maybe we need to take the time to actually think. Yeah, think first, do later, and just to contemplate our own importance in the grand scheme of things. So recognizing your imperfections, I suppose, might mean discovering that other people around you, even though they also are imperfect, might have something to offer the world and might have some nuggets of wisdom or some direction. And that if you listen to others, maybe, at least collectively, people could come up with something a little bit more useful. Another one here is do small things with love, putting your love into everyday tasks because they're important, right? This is the work usually assigned to women. Of course, she did it in the monastery. But oftentimes these everyday tasks are looked down upon as servant work. And it looks like Therese's attitude was, yeah, this is the stuff of life, right? This is what I can do. And without this stuff, no one's going to eat tonight, or no one's going to have clean clothes. And how can we function if we don't have food or clothes or a place to sleep? And so reorienting, I would say, it sounds useful in reorienting people towards the reality of human existence, which is that we are physical beings with physical needs, and we are very vulnerable, and we really do need each other to take care of each other. And so these types of daily tasks can remind people of this. So I like that. And I think that's worth exploring. Trust in God's mercy. Well, I mean, it's better to trust in God than men, I would say. Like, he has a better track record. um, Childlike confidence that God loves you and will help you grow in holiness. I like that because I don't think that we need to have confidence that God's going to be on our side as far as our political position, or, is going to make sure that we have enough money to, pay bills next month. I just really don't think God's into that too much. And I think that, but I do believe in God. And so I like that emphasis to grow in holiness, to grow in good character. That reminds me, like, there's a lot of people seem to be interested in Marcus Aurelius right now. Maybe for the same reason I got attracted to St. Therese of Lisieux. As I understand it, this Stoic philosopher was a lot about, like, although he was an emperor, he was humble. So that might be another one to kind of look at eventually. Let go of perfectionism, it says here. That's Teresa. Let go of perfectionism. Don't focus on big actions, but instead bring God into your everyday life. Think of how the world would be if more people, particularly, more people who now are in leadership positions or have been in the past, actually focused on bringing God into their everyday lives in a real way, and acted it out through small actions and not big ones. Not having to bigger everything. Would not the world potentially be in a different situation right now without so many big, big dreams? I'm beginning to wonder. And then find joy in service. See the value in doing small acts of kindness for others. I think some people get this in a sort of slogan way, but we could all definitely do with more of that. So, while I am a political philosophy professor, and I mean, arguably, I know more about political philosophy than maybe lots of other people. Okay. One thing I hope you've noticed is that I don't go like telling people what to do very often in a real strident way. I do believe that people are bettered through just getting an education. And I do value things like just growing your own mind and your character and becoming more civilized as a human being, which to me means absorbing the wisdom from the past and learning to appreciate beauty, developing good taste. It's important to me. Not everybody agrees with that. But to me, good taste is a goal to be had, or at least to be striven for. A sense of humaneness, right? In prior generations, conservatives, some of them, a certain type of conservative, was more prone to admiring the hallmarks of civilization, higher education and great works of art and literature and, cultural wealth, And I still resonate with that, even though I know that's a thing of the past and largely very few people care. But I do think that the type of the type of humility that I'm kind of attracted to here goes along with that, with saying, oh, I am not a great artist. I am not the author of Crime and Punishment, Um, I am not, somebody who can produce groundbreaking works like Jean-Paul Sartre, Most of us are not. And even if we end up being somebody like that, usually the persons who become somebody that other people remember are persons who had no idea of that in their lifetime. Think about that. They had no idea of the impact that they would have in their lifetime. Many of them are like that. To be a person who is humane and humble, it would be good. And it would ingrain humility in us to go and actually appreciate great works of art in a museum, or to read something like this book that I'm going to read and say, you have something to teach me. And I would sooner trust somebody who had that level of humility to join in leadership of our societies than somebody who is so incredibly confident about all their capabilities. Now, currently, we have somebody in charge of my country who is the opposite of that, right? I mean, there is not a humble bone in his body. But I would say that he is just he's like the exemplar of a mindset that has been destroying, building up, let's face it, building up, but also basically destroying civilizations for centuries. We should be able to do better, but we won't be able to do better until we're humble, until we're conservative in that sense, until we're able to realize our limitations alongside of our capabilities. So I would just urge us all to kind of sit with the situation and think hard and think again and listen to others, uh, instead of simply adding to the cacophony. This is a strange period of time. The world has seen many others. It will survive. One of the other things I've been thinking about reading is Spengler's Decline of the West. I don't know, though. Anyway, you may be hearing more from me about Plato's Gorgias, Saint Therese of Lisieux, maybe Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, just because that's definitely a source of incredible wisdom about the follies of imperial democratic leadership. Well, that's it for now.